and administration of fire safety measures. This is mostly about enforcement, very procedural, this chapter, like I said, but it's important because we need to understand yung process of getting permits, yung process of checking buildings, process of reviewing plans, etc. Okay? So generally, when it comes to the enforcement of the fire code requirements, enforcement of the fire safety features, here are some of the general guidelines, parang rules of thumb. First, the fire code requires that all buildings in the Philippines must be inspected to ensure fire safety and to ensure compliance with the fire code. Okay? In particular, fire safety inspection must be a requirement for the following. Certificate of occupancy, which we sometimes call the occupancy permit. Recorded the fire safety inspection for the business permit, permit to operate, and at the same time, the evaluation of plans is required for building permits. We'll discuss these things as we move through rule number 9. Okay, but these are the foundational principles. Okay, so how is the fire code enforced? Well, that's the big question kasi in rule number 9. How is it enforced? If you read rule number 9, you'll understand that there's a system of evaluations and inspections. Evaluation is generally a word that we use for floor plans, for plans. Plans are evaluated. Inspection is generally a word we use for buildings. Buildings are inspected. So why evaluate plans and why inspect buildings? For the same reason, to check for compliance with the fire code. That's the main reason. That's the simplest way I can explain that. So anyway, the fire code is enforced through this system of evaluations and inspections. Okay, so as you can see, the system is a 4-step, or well, not really. Actually, it is kind of step by step, I guess, but parang four types of evaluations and inspections ito that are all intended to check for compliance, ensure that plans and buildings comply with the requirements, and also to catch violators of the fire code. Okay, so the 4 items on our list are the following: building plan review, inspection during construction, inspection after completion of construction, and then you have business inspection and routine and annual inspection. I guess you could say that this is a step-by-step process. Okay, the only reason I hesitate is step number 4 is not always required. It's not required for all buildings, especially business inspection. Pero yeah, it is kind of a step-by-step process, I guess. It starts from the beginning, and then item 4 is medyo nasa bandang dulo yan. So it's kind of a step-by-step process in that way. Okay, so let's go over the details of the process. Again, the process or the system of evaluations and inspections, it starts with the building plan review. Ito yung pinakaunang parang checking for compliance. This is the very first time that we check for compliance, or that the fire department will check for compliance with the fire code. During this stage, called the building plan review. When does this happen? Before I read the slide, let's talk about when does this happen. This happens around the time that the plans are more or less finished and the building owner is already applying for the building permit. Like applying ng building permit, that's around this time. Okay, so what happens around this time? To apply for the building permit, you have to submit plans to the building official. Okay, now a copy of those plans must be endorsed to the fire department for their evaluation. Okay, now the plans will be given to the fire department, and it will be handed over to a plan evaluator, whose job is to review the plans to determine compliance with the requirements of the fire code. Okay, so the plan evaluator will review the plans. After the review, the evaluator will have findings. The findings now would either be the design is compliant or the design is not compliant, either of the two lang. Okay? Based on these findings, an FSEC or a notice of disapproval will be issued. FSEC stands for Fire Safety Evaluation Clearance. We'll talk about that in detail in a bit. Pero that's what you get kung pasado, sir, pasado yung plano. Okay, kung na-review yung plano and compliant naman, then an FSEC will be issued. But kung hindi pasado, like maraming nakitang violations, for example, then a notice of disapproval will be issued. Okay. Some important notes this earlier, I'd like to point out that the FSEC, which is what you get when you parang pass this step, the FSEC is required for the building permit. I'll say that now. And the FSCR, which we used to call the FALAR 1, must be submitted alongside the building plans. Okay, we'll discuss that more later. Okay, but for now, that's the building plan review phase. So the plans are reviewed, they're checked for compliance with the fire code. Kung compliant, then the FSEC will be issued. Okay? Assuming na pumasa naman, eh nabigyan naman ng FSEC and nakakuha naman ng building permit, the project will proceed to construction. Okay? And the question is, when will they check the project again? When will they check the project again for compliance with the fire code? Ang nakalagay sa rule number 9, during construction, the fire department must inspect the project again to determine compliance with the fire code. But to be honest, as you can see on the slide, the details of this inspection are a little bit murky, a little bit unclear. No, it's not really clear how many times, exactly when, sino ba yung pupunta kasi nakalagay the fire marshal shall inspect or shall cause to inspect. It's not really that clear, and it's not like merong required parang clearance that needs to be issued here. No, walang FSEC or anything. Okay. So ito is not as parang clear as the building plan review phase. Pero yes, ang bottom line is during construction, the fire department may inspect, must inspect, should inspect the project to determine compliance with the fire code. Then, when do they inspect or when do they check for compliance again? Now, the third, I call it intervention. Now, the third time that they check or the third intervention would be during this phase, inspection after completion of construction. Okay, so this happens around the time now. Tapos na yung construction, when the building is constructed and they're already applying for an occupancy permit. Okay, so this is what needs to happen. The fire department has to inspect the building again. So, nakalagay sa slide, after the completion of construction and before the occupancy of the building, before the building can be used or occupied, a fire safety inspector must inspect the building again to determine conformance with the fire code and the approved plans. Okay? Based on the findings of the inspector, an FSIC, Fire Safety Inspection Certificate, or a notice of disapproval will be issued. So, the inspector will check the building, check for compliance with the fire code, and not just the fire code, but the approved plans as well. Assuming na wala namang nakitang violations or issues, magbibigay siya ng inspection certificate, the FSIC, Fire Safety Inspection Certificate. Kung nagkaroon ng problem, like merong violations or merong hindi nasunod or something, then instead of an FSIC, a notice of disapproval will be issued. Okay, so two important things that I'd like you to notice compared to building plan review earlier. One, the approval or the document is called the FSIC, not FSEC. Okay. Second, this is an inspector now. Hindi na siya evaluator. This is a different person. Kanina plan evaluator yun. This is a different person. This is the fire safety inspector. And third, I think the pinaka-importanting thing to notice is in both steps, building plan review and inspection after completion of construction, we're checking for basically compliance with the fire code. But the difference is, in the first step, building plan review, what we had were plans. We had plans, floor plans, etc. And we were just checking if the plan, the design, was fire code compliant. In this step, however, inspection after completion of construction, we're no longer looking at the plan. We are now looking at the constructed and actual building. Okay, we have a building now. And it's the building now that we're checking. So that's an important distinction. Hindi na design yung check natin, hindi na plano. An actual building is what we're dealing with at this step. Okay? A few more important notes. Yung FSIC Fire Safety Inspection Certificate is required for the occupancy permit. You can't get an occupancy permit without that. For the FSIC, required naman yung FSCCR. I'll get to that in a bit. And also, testing and commissioning of the fire protective and warning systems must be witnessed by the fire safety inspector. Okay, assuming na pumasa naman sila sa inspection after completion of construction, so nakakuha naman ng FSIC, and therefore nakakuha naman ng occupancy permit, and therefore nagagamit na yung building. Will the fire department come back? Will they ever go back to check the building again? Yes, that's the final step in the process. This is called business inspection and routine/annual inspection. So it's two things actually. Meron tayong business inspection, meron routine inspection. I'll start with business inspection. This business inspection step is only applicable to industrial projects, commercial projects, and business projects, okay, business operations. So the way it works is, kailangan magpa-inspect ng mga building every time they need a business permit, a mayor's permit, or a BESA certificate of annual inspection. Okay, because for those documents, no business permit, mayor's permit, the FSIC is a requirement, and the only way to get an FSIC fire safety inspection certificate is magpa-inspect ng building. So nakalagay FSIC is required nga for the business permit, and so the building must be inspected, after which either bibigyan sila ng FSIC kung pasado sa inspection, or kung bagsak, like meron nakitang violation, notice to comply, NTC, will be issued. Okay? Advance info, FSMR is required for the issuance of the FSIC. We'll discuss that more in a bit. But I just want to make sure that you understand this parang big picture level. Business inspection, this is for businesses, number one. And number two, this requirement or these requirements essentially will result in businesses being inspected yearly. Okay, kasi the business permit is a yearly requirement. And every time they need a business permit, kailangan nila ng FSIC kasi it's a requirement. And the only way to get an FSIC is for the building to be inspected. So essentially, the system is designed in that way where all buildings will be inspected, well, businesses will be inspected at least once a year. Okay, so that's business inspection. But then the other one is routine and annual inspection. Ito naman is for other buildings, no, not for businesses. No, and this is not for business permit purposes. Nakalagay lang sa fire code, for buildings that are not classified nga as business or industrial or commercial, routine inspection will be conducted by the fire department to determine compliance. It's not very clear if you read it in rule number 9 how this is going to happen, like which buildings and who's going to inspect. Is this absolutely required? How often exactly is this? I mean, the word annual appears in the title, so I guess it's safe to assume na annually siya gagawin. But to be honest, medyo vague yung requirement nito. It's not as clear as the business inspection requirement. All they say is non-business buildings must be routinely inspected. Yun na yung nakalagay. Now, we're still in rule number 9, but now we get to the part where we differentiate and understand ano yung FSCR, FSCCR, and FSMR natin tawag. Okay? So, FYI, these used to be called FALAR 1, FALAR number 2, and FALAR number 3 in the old IRR, in the 2008 IRR. These three reports, and they're reports by the way, these three reports were called FALAR 1, FALAR 2, FALAR 3. FALAR back then it meant Fire and Life Safety Assessment Report, okay? But now they're no longer called FALARs in the 2019 IRR. FALAR 1 is now called the FSCR, or the Fire Safety Compliance Report. FALAR 2 is now called the FSCCR, or the Fire Safety Compliance and Commissioning Report. And FALAR 3 is now the FSMR, the Fire Safety Maintenance Report. So before we talk about yung contents ng bawat report, because these are reports, no? All of them are reports. Letter R stands for report. We need to understand kailan ba ito required isubmit yung mga report niyan. Kasi isasubmit yan sa fire department. Now, these are reports that talk about different things that are prepared by different people, but they're in the end all submitted to the fire department. Okay, so these are required for buildings that are required by the fire code to install either a wet standpipe system, an automatic fire suppression system, or an automatic fire detection and alarm system. Again, buildings that are required to have a wet standpipe system, an automatic fire suppression system, or an automatic fire detection and alarm system must submit the FSCR, FSCCR, and FSMR. Okay? So when are they submitted exactly? Ito yung general parang list of list of general rules. No, the FSCR is a requirement for the FSEC. The FSCCR and the FSMR are both required for the FSIC. Now, the FSCCR is the report that you submit when you're getting the FSIC for the occupancy permit. The FSMR naman is the report that you submit when you're getting the FSIC for business permit purposes. Okay, so again, three reports. The FSCR Fire Safety Compliance Report is a detailed and design analysis of the fire safety features to be installed in the building. So that's the parang the summary of the FSCR. Analysis siya ng fire safety features. Now, in other words, the FSCR is a report about the design, the fire safety design of the building. The FSCCR, which again stands for Fire Safety Compliance and Commissioning Report. The FSCCR is a certification that the approved plans and the specifications were duly implemented. Okay? In other words, the FSCCR is mostly about the construction of the building. If the FSCR was mostly about the design of the building, then the FSCCR is mostly about the construction of the building. FSMR naman, the Fire Safety Maintenance Report, is all about maintenance. From the acronym FSMR, Fire Safety Maintenance Report. It's all about the maintenance. It's a report on conducted annual maintenance of fire safety and protection systems. So, three different reports. Okay, the first one is mostly about the design of the building. The second one is mostly about the construction of the building, and the third one is mostly about the maintenance of the building. Design, construction, maintenance. Okay, now we're going to just talk about these things a little bit more detail. Okay, so the FSCR, Fire Safety Compliance Report, I said is about design, right? And it's the designers that typically are expected to prepare this report kasi it's about design. So nakalagay sa fire code is a report submitted by either the engineer of record or the architect of record. It contains a detailed design analysis of the fire safety features to be installed, and it also certifies that the design is fire code compliant. So in other words, when you read this report, you're going to learn more about the design of the building, whether or not the design is fire safe, and whether or not the design is compliant with the fire code. Okay. Who prepares this? Again, the designers prepare it, either the architect of record or the engineer of record. And why do they need to prepare this? Because this is a requirement for the FSEC, okay, for the FSEC, which in turn is a requirement for the building permit. Okay, so that's why this needs to be submitted. Okay. Next, ano naman ng FSCR? When we say it's about design, when we say it's about the safety features, ano na yung naman? Madami. There's a long list. You can read the fire code. Pero some examples, I won't read everything up. Pero nakalagay codes and standards used in the design, project description, description ng exits, travel distances, smoke control management, ano yung basis ng naging design, calculations, design criteria, all of that. No, these are things you expect to see in the FSCR. Okay, let's go to the second report, the FSCCR, the Fire Safety Compliance and Commissioning Report. I said that this report is mostly about construction, or the construction of the building. And that's why this report is prepared and submitted by the contractor or the construction manager. Sila yung primary people involved in the construction phase. Sila yung nagtayo eh. Okay, so sila yung gagawa ng report. The point of this report is to certify that the plans and the specifications that were submitted for the permit and for the FSCR earlier were actually followed and implemented. Another point of this report is to certify that all of the fire protection features, the life safety features that apply to the project that are required for this project were properly installed. And finally, parang very general yung third one, the report certifies that the actual building, the completed building, complies with the requirements of the fire code. Fire code compliant yung building. Okay? Who prepares this? Again, the contractor or the CM. Is it important that they prepare this? Of course, because this is required for the FSIC. And the FSIC, in turn, would be required naman for the occupancy permit. Okay? So that's that. Ano naman ang FSCCR? Some examples, pinaka-importante talaga yung certification na fire code compliant yung building, na nasunod yung mga fire safety features in the FSCR. Pero kasama rin sa laman ng report as-built plans, testing and commissioning certificates, and if there were any changes or deviations from the approved plans, description of those changes and the standards used for those changes. But take note that these changes must be approved first, before they can be implemented. So they should have obtained approval for the changes, and then i-report na lang ulit dito. Finally, the last report, the third one, is the FSMR, or the Fire Safety Maintenance Report. Again, like I said earlier, this report is about maintenance. Okay? And so who prepares the report? As you can see, the building owner, primarily. The building owner or his representative or his building administrator. The point is, it's the owner. And the reason it's the owner is because maintenance of an operational building is primarily the duty of the owner. Hindi na duty ng contractor yan. Basta lang hindi yung duty ng consultants or designers, right? So it's the owner's duty, and that's why this report is supposed to be submitted by the building owner. The report is about maintenance. It's about the conducted annual maintenance of the fire safety and fire protection systems, and the report should certify that all of the fire safety systems are installed and they're all working. They're all in operational condition. Okay? Why is it important for the building owner to prepare the report? Because this is required for the FSIC, which is required naman for the business permit, which they get every year. So that's the idea. Okay, that's the third report. What does this third report contain? Building classification, etc., description of the project, number of exits. Everything importante, the last two bullet points, maintenance and testing records for fire pumps, sprinkler systems, portable extinguishers, etc. And yung results ng mga test nila, annual fire pump flow test, annual main drain test, standpipe water flow test, etc. All of these reports para tell the reader about how the building is being maintained. Okay, let's also talk about the FSEC and the FSIC, which I already discussed earlier, which I think you already understand the difference, but just to be sure, the FSEC is the Fire Safety Evaluation Clearance. This is required for the building permit, and the FSEC is only issued by the fire department when the plans are reviewed by the plan evaluator, and it's issued by the fire marshal to the applicant upon determination that the design is fire code compliant. Okay. On the other hand, FSIC naman is the Fire Safety Inspection Certificate. This is a prerequisite for the occupancy permit and the business permit and other similar permits. From the word, from the title, Fire Safety Inspection Certificate, this is a certification on the inspected building. So this requires inspection of the building by the fire safety inspector. Based on the findings of the inspector, the fire marshal will either issue the FSIC or not issue the FSIC. Okay, so let's try to put all of the things that we discussed in Rule 9 together, show 3 sample scenarios so that you remember, you guys understand alin-alin yung related na requirements and alin-alin steps yung nangyayari at the same time. So 3 scenarios. My first scenario is the building permit scenario. So this is the scenario where you need a building permit for your project. Okay? So I'm just going to recap now paano naging related yung mga yan. Before you can construct, you have to have a building permit. No, nakalagay, prerequisite for construction, building permit. Kailangan mo ng building permit before you can construct, of course, right? But a prerequisite for the building permit is the FSEC. Okay, this is true. We said that one of the requirements for the building permit is the FSEC. How do you get the FSEC? The prerequisite for the FSEC is building plan review. No? Magkaka-FSEC ka lang kapag na-review yung plan mo, yung plans, di ba, for the project are reviewed by the fire department, by the plan evaluator, and pumasa ka sa review, no, fire code compliant and design. That's how you get the FSEC. Okay? Now, how do you, saan papasok yung FSCR? One of the requirements for building plan review is the FSCR. According to the fire code, hindi i-evaluate yung plans. Now, the plan evaluator will not evaluate your plans unless the FSCR is submitted alongside the plans. Without the FSCR, the plans will not be reviewed. Okay, so it's important that the FSCR is submitted. And again, who prepares the FSCR? That's a report about the design of the building, so it should be the designers na gagawa ng report niyan. Either the architect of record or the engineers of record. Okay, second scenario, the certificate of occupancy scenario. So ito naman yung scenario where you're done with the building, with the construction of the building, and you now need an occupancy permit. So you need an occupancy permit, that's the first thing, before you can occupy. No, a prerequisite for occupancy is the certificate of occupancy or the occupancy permit. Okay, but we also said, paano ka kukuha ng occupancy permit? One of the requirements for this is the FSIC. Kailangan mo ng FSIC bago ka makakuha ng occupancy permit. Okay, so that's the fire safety inspection certificate. So, since kailangan mo pa ng FSIC, paano ba magka-FSIC? Nakalagay, the only way to get the FSIC is magpa-inspect ng building. A fire safety inspection must be conducted, and saan papasok yung FSCCR? Bukod sa inspection, dapat ma-inspect ka, dapat pumasa ka sa inspection yung building. Dapat pumasa sa inspection. The FSCCR must be submitted also, because according to the fire code, kahit pasado ka sa inspection, kung wala pong nasasabit na FSCCR, hindi ka makakakuha ng FSIC. Again, the FSCCR is the report prepared by the contractor certifying na tama yung na-construct na building, it follows the plans and the fire code, and kailangan i-submit ng contractor or the CM because it's going to be required for the FSIC. Alright, third and final scenario, business permit scenario. So you have a business and you need a business permit, which by the way you need to get every year. A prerequisite to operating a business is the business permit, of course, and one of the requirements for the business permit is the FSIC. And the requirement for the FSIC is the same. Fire safety inspection, okay, and similar to earlier, to the second scenario kanina, kailangan masubmit yung FSMR or the fire safety maintenance report before the FSIC can be issued. And again, who prepares the FSMR? It is the owner. Okay, the building owner is the one who must submit the FSMR. Because it's his duty, it's the owner's duty to maintain the building. So that's the end of the last scenario. We're just making sure you understand now. Now these are the ones that are related.